Good evening and welcome to Courts Today by Live Law. I am Urvashi Chauhan, and in this video, we bring you top legal developments from across the country. The Supreme Court reserves verdict in Justice Yashwant Verma's plea, while Delhi High Court raises tough questions on the centre's role in Udaipur files case. We also cover a major murder conviction upheld by the MP High Court, Supreme Court's direction to Kerala in the VC appointments issue, and its refusal to delay framing of charges against Lalu Prasad Yadav. Plus a crucial road accident ruling and a strong remark by the Allahabad High Court on state interference in religious matters. Make sure to watch till the end and do not forget to like, share, subscribe and hit the bell icon. Starting with Justice Yashwant Verma's matter, a sitting judge of the Allahabad High Court who has challenged an in-house inquiry report that found him culpable in a serious misconduct case involving discovery of large sums of cash at his official residence. The controversy, as you know, began on 14th March when a fire at an outhouse of his then official Delhi residence led to the accidental recovery of huge piles of currency notes by fire officials. This discovery sparkled a public outcry. The then Chief Justice of India, Sanjeev Khanna, initiated an in-house inquiry by a 3-judge committee. Justice Verma was repatriated to the Allahabad High Court and judicial work was withdrawn from him. After examining over 50 witnesses and evidence, the committee concluded that the judge and his family had control over the premises where the cash was found and that he failed to explain his presence, offering only denials. The committee submitted its report in May this year and the CJI forwarded it to the President and the Prime Minister with the recommendation for Justice Verma's removal following his refusal to resign. Justice Verma has now petitioned the Supreme Court, arguing that an in-house inquiry cannot trigger removal proceedings as only Parliament can remove a judge under Article 124(4) for proved misbehavior or incapacity. The Supreme Court, led by Justice Dipankar Datta and Justice A.G. Masih, heard the case and reserved its judgment today. During the hearing, senior advocate Kapil Sibal, representing Justice Verma, argued that the Judges Inquiry Act occupies the entire constitutional field regarding judicial removal and that any in-house procedure leading to removal violates Article 124. Sibal sought a declaration that Chief Justice of India's recommendation recommending Verma's removal was non-est, effectively null. The bench, however, interrogated the conduct and timing of the petition. Justice Datta queried why Justice Verma participated in the in-house procedure if he considered it unconstitutional and why he did not challenge it at the outset. While the court acknowledged that leaking of evidence like videos was improper, it emphasized that the in-house inquiry was a preliminary step and not a removal mechanism itself. The court emphasized that the in-house procedure is grounded in Supreme Court precedent, for example, K. Veeraswamy and Ravichandran Iyer case, and recognized as part of the law of land under Article 141. Justice Datta underscored that if materials suggest judicial misconduct, the Chief Justice has a duty to forward them to the President and the Prime Minister, but noted that the ultimate power to remove a judge lies solely with the Parliament. Also, the court today addressed a separate petition by Advocate Matthews J. Nedumpara seeking FIR registration against the judge. The court ordered him to disclose how he obtained the inquiry report and to file a supporting affidavit. The court also reminded him that without filing any complaint before the police, he could not file a writ petition. The release of the film Udaipur Files, Kanhaiya Lal Tailor Murder, continues to be stalled in a legal controversy. The Delhi High Court had stayed the release of the film in response to pleas claiming that the film could affect the ongoing Kanhaiya Lal murder trial. The centre later proposed 6 cuts to the film, which is now being challenged in the Delhi High Court. At the centre of the dispute is whether the central government exceeded its powers when it directed the 6 cuts to the film while exercising its revisional powers under Section 6 of the Cinematograph Act. The High Court bench, led by Chief Justice D.K. Upadhyay, raised a crucial question. Did the centre even have the statutory authority to order these changes? The court observed that Section 6 no longer gives the centre the wide-ranging powers it once had and reminded the government that its actions must remain within the 4 corners of the statute. The additional Solicitor General appearing for centre insisted that government had acted based on a High Court direction and that a high-level committee had recommended the 6 cuts. But the court pressed further, saying that the center seemed to have acted like an appellate authority, something that the law does not permit. The new law referred to here is the Cinematograph Amendment Act 2023, which amended the original 1952 Act, and one key change was narrowing of center's revisional powers under Section 6. During the hearing today, senior advocate Menaka Guruswamy, representing Mohammad Javed, who is one of the accused in the Kanhaiya Lal murder case, argued that releasing the film would deeply compromise her client's right to a fair trial. She said that 160 witnesses are yet to be examined, and that the film, which includes lines picked directly from the charge sheet, could influence judges, witnesses, and court officials. She pointed out that India's free speech protections are not absolute and are subject to reasonable restrictions under Article 19(2). She also criticized the center's intervention, arguing that the government cannot function like the censor board by suggesting cuts, deleting dialogues, or altering disclaimers. The additional Solicitor General, however, maintained that the film had already gone through a two-stage review. First by the censor board, which suggested 55 cuts, and then by a specifically constituted committee, including officials from Ministry of External Affairs, Ministry of Home Affairs, and advisory panel members. This second review led to the center's recommendation of 6 more cuts. But the court was not convinced. It pointedly remarked that suggesting such cuts under revisional powers resembled an appellate review, which is not sanctioned by the Karnataka High Court ruling that had led to the amendment of Section 6 in the first place. Well, the matter has now been posted for further hearing on Friday. Stay tuned. The Madhya Pradesh High Court has upheld conviction of Dr. Mamta Pathak, an assistant professor of chemistry, for the brutal murder of her husband, Dr. Neeraj Pathak. The case dates back to April 2021, when Neeraj was found dead in their home under suspicious circumstances. Initially, Mamta reported his death as an accident, but soon the post-mortem report told a different story. It revealed that Neeraj died due to cardiorespiratory failure caused by electrocution. This revelation led to registration of a murder case under Section 302 of the IPC. As the investigation progressed, police recovered key pieces of evidence from the couple's home: sleeping pills, electrical wires, and CCTV DVRs. A sessions court later convicted Mamta, accepting the prosecution's theory that she first drugged her husband and then electrocuted him. Challenging the conviction, Mamta Pathak argued her case in person before the High Court. She questioned the reliability of the post-mortem report and claimed the forensic analysis was flawed. According to her, the body did not show signs of decomposition and no conclusive chemical or microscopic tests were done to prove electrocution. She also claimed that since her husband was on a wooden bed and his feet were on a plastic chair, both being non-conductors of electricity, electric shock was unlikely. But the state argued that the post-mortem was conducted by a team of 3 doctors and the injuries were consistent with electric burns. The prosecution argued that her objections were just attempts to raise doubts using technicalities, but they failed to shake the solid chain of circumstantial evidence. The High Court ultimately has agreed now. Referring to Supreme Court's ruling in Sharad Birdhichand Sarda case, the bench of Justices Vivek Agarwal and Dev Narayan Mishra said that the case met the standard for conviction based on circumstantial evidence. Her presence at the scene, recovery of the items, and the nature of injuries pointed to no one else but her. The court also rejected her claim that the police forced her to sign documents. It said that there was no material to support that allegation and observed that she had cleverly tried to create confusion by saying her signatures were obtained under duress after 7 days. The bench further noted that raising doubts about the FIR or the absence of certain witnesses could not nullify the entire trial, especially when the FIR was registered on time based on her own report and had no signs of being tampered with. Hence, her conviction was upheld. In the next update, the Supreme Court has urged the Kerala governor and the state government to set aside their differences and work together in appointing vice chancellors to 2 key universities, that is APJ Abdul Kalam Technological University and Kerala University of Digital Sciences, Innovation and Technology. The case concerns a dispute between the Kerala governor and the state government over who has the authority to appoint vice chancellors to certain state universities. The matter began when the governor, in his role as Chancellor of Universities in Kerala, appointed temporary vice chancellors to the 2 universities. However, the Kerala government objected, arguing that such appointments required its recommendation as per the respective state university acts. The issue reached the Kerala High Court, which ruled against the governor. The High Court held that appointments made by him were invalid as they did not follow the procedure laid down in the state laws, specifically that appointments of temporary VCs needed the state government's input and were limited to 6 months. Challenging this order, the governor approached the Supreme Court, arguing that under UGC, that is University Grants Commission regulations, he had the authority to make such appointments to ensure academic functioning, and that these central regulations overrode the state laws. The matter came up before a bench of Justices Ehsanuddin Amanullah and S.V.N. Bhatti in the Supreme Court. The court expressed concern that the ongoing tussle between the constitutional authorities was disrupting the functioning of universities and could harm students' interests. It observed that the situation should not turn into a political power struggle and urged both sides to act with maturity and cooperate. The judges pointed out that it was not a question of power, but a matter of students' welfare. Why should students suffer due to this litigation? The bench asked. The court acknowledged that while permanent appointments may take time, the governor could continue with temporary vice chancellors for now. However, it advised that regular appointments be resumed at the earliest through a properly constituted search committee, whose composition is also under legal challenge in a separate case pending before the High Court. The top court has today refused to defer framing of charges by the trial court in the Land for Jobs case against former Bihar Chief Minister and RJD leader Lalu Prasad Yadav. The case investigated by the CBI pertains to allegedly irregular appointments to Group D posts in various railway zones between 2004 and 2009 during Lalu Prasad Yadav's tenure as Union Railway Minister. In return for these jobs, land parcels were allegedly transferred to members of his family and a company which was later acquired by them. The CBI filed its charge sheet in October 2022, naming 16 accused, including Yadav, his wife Rabri Devi, and daughter Misha Bharti. Yadav had sought a stay on the trial proceedings until 12th August, the date when his petition seeking quashing of the case is scheduled for hearing before the Delhi High Court. However, a bench of Justices M.M. Saundaresh and N. Koteshwar Singh rejected the request, stating that framing of charges by the trial court would be subject to the outcome of a High Court's decision. The court clarified that going ahead with charge framing would not render the pending petition infructuous. During the hearing, Additional Solicitor General S.V. Raju, appearing for CBI, opposed the plea. He submitted that Yadav could raise the issue of CBI's alleged failure to obtain prior sanction under Section 17A of the Prevention of Corruption Act before the trial court itself. Raju also urged the court to impose costs on Yadav for what he called a frivolous application, but the bench declined to do so. I must tell you here that this development follows the Supreme Court's earlier decision from 18th July, where it had refused to stay the trial proceedings. At that time too, the court had noted that the challenge before it was against only an interim order of the High Court, while the main quashing petition was still pending. In another update, the Apex Court has held that sudden and unanticipated braking on a highway where vehicles are expected to travel at high speed amounts to negligence. The court was hearing a case involving a 20-year-old engineering student who lost his leg in a tragic motor accident in the year 2013. The young man was riding a motorcycle when a car in front of him suddenly applied brakes, causing his bike to collide with it. He fell on the road and was run over by a bus coming from behind. His leg had to be amputated from the waist down. Initially, the Motor Accident Claims Tribunal awarded compensation of 91,62,000 but reduced it to around 73 lakhs due to 20% contributory negligence on the part of the victim, citing reasons like he did not have a valid license. On appeal, the Madras High Court further reduced the compensation to around 58 lakhs and increased the victim's share of negligence from 20% to 30%. Well, now the Supreme Court has partially overturned the High Court's order. A bench of Justices Sudhanshu Dholia and Arvind Kumar enhanced the car driver's liability from 40% to 50%, held the bus driver's 30% liable, and limited the victim's contributory negligence to 20%. The court noted that there was no evidence that the car driver gave any warning or signal before stopping, as required on a highway. The court fixed the total compensation at 1 crore 14 lakhs and after applying the 20% deduction for contributory negligence, directed that that around 91 lakhs be paid to the victim along with interest at 7.5% per annum. The compensation must be paid within 4 weeks. Since both the bus and the car were insured, the insurers were directed to bear the liability in proportion. The court also restored the 18 lakh amount awarded by the tribunal for attendant charges, which had been reduced to 5 lakh by the High Court. It held that given the extent of disability, the appellant would require lifelong assistance for daily activities. The court also enhanced compensation for loss of marriage prospects from 2.5 lakhs to 5 lakhs and acknowledged future medical expenses of 5 lakhs. And lastly, the Allahabad High Court has strongly questioned the Uttar Pradesh government over its ordinance proposing a statutory trust to manage the Banke Bihari temple. The dispute pertains to management and redevelopment of the Banke Bihari temple in Vrindavan, Mathura. The temple has traditionally been managed by around 360 priests who are descendants and followers of Swami Haridas. However, over time, internal conflicts among these sects and complaints of mismanagement reached the Allahabad High Court. In March this year, the court appointed Advocate Sanjay Goswami as amicus curiae to assist in resolving the matter. Meanwhile, the Uttar Pradesh government promulgated the Uttar Pradesh Shri Banke Bihari Ji Temple Trust Ordinance 2025, seeking to form a statutory trust, that is Shri Banke Bihari Ji Mandir Nyas, to manage the temple and its facilities. The trust would have 11 nominated trustees, including up to 7 ex officio members from the government, all required to be followers of Sanatan Dharma. Today, Justice Rohit Ranjan Agarwal of the Allahabad High Court made strong oral observations questioning the constitutional propriety of the ordinance. The court said that it will not allow the state to enter into religion. It said that constitution has no religion and the government has no religion. The judge directed the state to limit its role to external administration and not interfere in the religious functioning of the temple. Justice Agarwal also criticized both the state and the existing temple management, that is the Goswamis. The former for trying to enter a private religious domain and the latter for alleged corruption and lack of spiritual integrity. Well, the matter was adjourned to 6th August after the state failed to respond to earlier queries. You should also know that separately, the Supreme Court last week heard a challenge to constitutionality of the 2025 ordinance. And during the hearing, the court asked the temple's management committee to furnish details about how many temples across India have been taken over by governments through legislation. Also, this issue runs parallel to an earlier dispute over the temple corridor redevelopment plan. The key legal issues now are whether the state can form a statutory trust to manage a privately managed religious institution or not, the scope of state involvement in religious affairs under the constitution, management and lack of transparency in temple administration, and use of temple funds for state-led redevelopment projects.